Hey guys, okay look, there isn't much time. Ubisoft is shutting all of this down tomorrow, and we need to get the hell out of here. Time's running out. I wonder what everyone else is doing right now.
Go from Miami to like Detroit. We'll drive through the mountains, gonna be nice. And we're gonna drive through Las Vegas and maybe end in Los Angeles.
Meet Whammy4. He's the owner of a Discord server called The Crew Unlimited. He created it as a space for people to get together and play. Of course, that's putting it simply. They get up to a lot more than that. The server hosts a whole collection of beautiful screenshots, cool car designs, and a bunch of research material. It's seriously impressive. There's beta footage, pre-release articles, and also a wealth of technical details on the game. That's because these guys don't just love The Crew the franchise, they love The Crew the first game. Most online spaces understandably focus on the sequels.
They just didn't know where to go, you know, like you go on the official Crew Discord. There's a channel to talk about The Crew 1 is kind of like shoved below somewhere.
It's an afterthought.
Yeah.
Whammy has a passion for this game and knows a lot about it, so before it all disappears forever, I wanted to find out as much as I could.
Wait, let's go here. Whoa, why is there one jump here? What the hell? I don't remember that. Alright.
I also wanted to ask perhaps the most pressing question. Why? You see, when Ubisoft announced that the game's servers were going to shut down, thus taking the entire game away forever, the server jumped from 100 people to 500 in 2 days. Now it's over 1,000. 1,000 people, all gathered around a title which hasn't had a significant update in over 7 years. If you've played enough Team Fortress 2, these probably sound like rookie numbers, but it also feels like a lot of dedication for The Crew of all things. For publisher Ubisoft, 2014 was a notorious year, where their games got hyped to high hell, only for most to meet lukewarm receptions. I always assumed that The Crew quietly died out, with verdicts of, oh, it's fun but nothing special. But that was before I heard that 1,000 people had jumped right back in. So it must be special. But how? Here's something: the continental United States as a map. A 2013 article from Edge gives us some saucy figures. 7,000 miles of road, 15 cities, 6 of which are comparable in size to Liberty City in GTA 4. In The Crew, driving coast to coast takes an hour and a half. Going all the way around takes 4 hours. Oh, I've got the option of repairing here. Jesus, 11,000!
What?
Ow! Well, this is optional.
Oh, which makes the manual gearbox slightly hard to use. Oh my god, what the fuck?
The developers definitely had the pedigree to pull it off. Little did I know, Ivory Tower was formed from former Eden Games alumni. Eden Games as in Test Drive Unlimited? For the uninitiated, this early Xbox 360 game featured the island of Oahu in Hawaii, as in the whole island. Driving end to end would take about half an hour. It released in 2006 on the 360 and also the PlayStation 2, the PSP. It was ported by a different studio, but wow, that's masochistic. Anyway, Ivory Tower started developing The Crew in 2008 and shopped around for a publisher. Ubisoft evidently liked it and offered to put the Reflections studio on the game as well. Reflections as in Driver San Francisco, another excellent game. There was some serious expertise behind The Crew, and what's cool is that you can find remnants of those prior games, whether it's the cutscenes that look straight out of Driver San Fran, or the 8-player limit carried over from TDU. So, how did they actually manage to make a map so huge? Well, the base layer was generated with a digital elevation model, which is basically a, you know what, actually, let me just go do this, and then this, and welcome to Ohio. Yeah, so they did that for the whole US, then split everything into ecosystems that control what buildings, animals, plants, and pedestrians can exist in each area. Don't expect to find any moose in New York City. Then they used their own proprietary tools to draw roads across the country. Races were outlined as they built up the city's streets, and all of this comes together to make a map of frankly disgusting scale. This is without mentioning the landmarks dotted around the world, lovingly recreated to sell the concept of the United States. After all, could it really be the US without some roadside attractions?
And you see these little landmarks, they put them all around the map. You could learn a good piece of history and such about American places.
Apparently I visited 152 out of 242, so there's still quite a lot I haven't seen.
For example, I learned about the first piece of concrete road in Detroit.
Oh, really?
You know that, for example? Yeah, you can like go visit it in the game, it's pretty fun.
Ah, I'll have to go back.
I can go back later.
Yeah. The crew isn't really the US, it's an interpretation of it. Driving across a full-scale United States would not only be impractical, it would also be dull. Think of all those long country roads that are just a straight line going on forever. So instead, Ivory Tower had to condense a whole continent into a palatable chunk. That meant carefully choosing cities, landmarks, and roads. I found a brilliant game developer article that includes the 4 criteria used to select locations in, The Crew 2. Yeah, it's the wrong game, but it offers valuable insight into the studio's general approach. The criteria were as follows. 1. How strongly is it associated with the image of the US and the American culture? 2. What is the geographic importance? How would it make our world consistent? 3. What is the visual appeal, with the aim of giving players a beautiful playground? 4. What's the potential in terms of gameplay? It creates a version of the United States with its own personality. It wants to not only show you what the US is, but also what being there is like. It's a Disney California adventure for the whole country.
Like the map is the main character.
That's an interesting way of putting it. I'm stealing that. I'm going to say that in the video and everyone's going to think I'm really insightful, so thank you for it.
You think I came up with that? I stole it from someone else.
Oh, perfect. They did an excellent job not relying on typical American media exports. Of course, the New York skyline is here, but there's also the Kennedy Space Center, vineyards just off of Santa Rosa, a ski village in the mountains, Hoover Dam.
Controlling the Mojave almost makes you wish for a nuclear winter.
I always saw the US and thought of New York and Cali, with a whole lot of generic space in between. After playing The Crew, I realised just how varied the United States is. This is a country the size of Europe, so it's no wonder the place feels like a continent.
I really like the snowy villages in The Crew. I just like the architecture in general. There's so much different architecture in the game. It's crazy. Like in this one game, in this one map.
There are so many cool areas to discover. It reminds me a lot of Just Cause 2, since both have a gargantuan map split into distinct biomes. In the same regard, there's always some lovely new detail to appreciate. The Crew has a lot of shops with modelled 3D interiors. There's different ambient sounds based on your location, something that you would hardly notice when you're careening down the road. Animals and pedestrians also vary by location. Apparently, the woods hide both a unicorn and Bigfoot. I never saw these. And I guess I never will now.
It's just, that's like one of the main keys to a great open world is having an open world that you want to be in, you know? Like, wow, this is so cool. I wish I was there right now. Not my darn character. That means it's a very good open world.
Years upon years of work to make this world, and it's all gonna disappear. Huh, looks like he's not getting any further. That's a pity. Well, that's not gonna be me. Here's an interesting tidbit. In 2014, there was no new Need for Speed game. For the crew, this was open season. Unfortunately, comparisons to Need for Speed weren't gonna be the issue. It was comparisons to Ubisoft's other games. As I mentioned, 2014 was a stacked year for the company, with 2 Assassin's Creed games, Watch Dogs, and Far Cry 4 all releasing beforehand. That meant that when the crew hit shelves, it became the runt of the litter. Critics liked the open world, but consistently griped over the game's structure. 4 games already that year had towers to climb that unlocked side missions in the area, and the crew was mocked for its radar dishes in lieu of a physical tower. The Ubisoft formula was already getting tiring. It's funny to think that was only 2 years after Far Cry 3, but we'd continue to see this formula for another decade afterwards. I always thought that the crew was unfairly put over the coals for some of its Ubiisms. It was the one game that year that was actually about traversing the map, rather than completing all of the content inside of it. Consider that every piece of side content, like landmarks and on-road challenges, all involve travel. I'd argue this is the one place where that structure makes sense. Sifting through old interviews, the developers curiously avoided calling it a racing game.
But I love driving that note.
Instead, it was a driving game. That shift in mentality really makes it stand out. You don't just go fast. You explore a country, make friends, and cruise around at your own pace. It really is a sequel to Test Drive Unlimited. The online format also gave the game an interesting aesthetic. In many ways, it feels like it's trying to be an MMO. You'll just be driving along until you pass someone, and then you're free to just go follow them. You can also form crews by inviting players, with one player marking destinations or activities. It feels a wee bit like making a lobby in Payday 2, the idea that someone is the host who aims to give everyone an enjoyable experience. Sometimes I would just end up roaming the US for hours with someone that I'd never met before.
People say that, they'd rather prefer, detail over size, but in games like this, it's not really a preference. It's like a core part of the game genre, this one.
The game also has a campaign which gradually takes you around the country.
Watch us absolutely destroy the time he has set. Oh, look who it is. It's shitbox Cam.
Why do you drive home in your mama's car?
Or better yet, why don't she pick you up?
It bathes in a gritty revenge story, representative of the time, opening at the heart of the automotive industry, Detroit. With each new region, you unlock a new car spec which suits the location. For example, street cars in the Midwest, dirt cars for the hills in the East Coast, or performance cars in the South, where there's long stretches of road to push the pedal to the metal. Particularly cool is the customization. Cars are not limited to one spec. Instead, you buy the full stock version, then choose a spec to apply on top. These affect the handling and the visual design of the car, sometimes in ways that feel deranged.
My paint job costs 55k.
I'm spending 120k on this.
It's like a pearlescent job, so it looks like a sunset and then some wave.
Mine.
The fuck?
It feels a lot like your typical healer, tank, mage, etc. in MMOs. It isn't just a general aesthetic, except, well, it doesn't make much sense to take a heavy raid car to a street race.
Oh, God. I hate ending a race with this car in it.
Events are restricted by car type, so you don't get that authentic feeling of forming a varied party. It ends up feeling more like you and your crew are simultaneously doing the same single-player objective, which is a shame. What the fuck is happening? The E3 2013 demo hints at this greater ambition. Unfortunately, none of it quite materialized as hoped. For example, you can align with a faction, think Alliance and Horde. They weren't used much, but there was a neat faction versus faction mode. That later got removed in an update, presumably because nobody used it. Multiplayer often didn't extend past your own 4-player crews, and there didn't seem to be much confidence in delivering a true MMO experience. Maybe it was due to session limits, maybe Ubisoft didn't want to run full-fat servers, or maybe somebody just found the concept too risky. There was clearly a larger concept hiding away that just never got to show itself. If it wasn't for the work of the Crew Unlimited Discord, I probably wouldn't have realised it was so ambitious.
Some like old interview from one of the developers of the crew from like before the game came out. They were asked about Europe, you know?
Yeah.
Like, what about Europe? They didn't say no, they said that maybe in the future it's plausible. Which it just kind of shows what was in, you know, the designers, directors' minds at the time. Like they were thinking about Europe, like, wow.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
So what did happen to the game? Well, there were 2 expansions. The first, Wild Run, added new events, motorbikes, monster trucks, drag cars, and drift cars. It also delivered some free content, like a photo mode and a dynamic weather system. But the most significant change was perhaps the most contentious. So what actually changed?
Well,
Is that opening up Pandora's box?
Yep. So most people probably noticed the graphics right away, right?
A graphics overhaul. The biggest change? A shift to PBR, physically based rendering. To make a long story very short, prior to the 8th console generation, most games relied on traditional techniques for texturing and lighting. The results looked like they were physically simulated, but often weren't. With improvements in computational power and the development of PBR in the film industry, light effects such as the scattering off of uneven surfaces could be physically simulated. PBR is now common practice. Wild Run, as a 2015 update, was one of the earlier games to fully adopt the technique. Sure, the visual style changed a bit, but this was a huge technical leap forward for the game. Whammy's got a whole thread on the server about this. Wild Run atrocities? Wow, he really hates it. So, it turns out they changed quite a lot alongside this. The HUD is different now. UI elements are now split between the old brushstroke style and a new generic modern style. Scuffs on the road are gone, snow on the road is fairly absent, and it turns out a lot of road types were removed.
Okay, are you seeing the trees in the distance looking all weird?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Oh
well.
wow, and then they all pop in. Yeah, the pop-in is pretty bad. So I went and looked at the game pre-Wild Run and, oh, it's bad there too. It's just bad in a different way. So I guess we have to ask the big question. Does Wild Run actually look better? This was frustrating to answer because honestly, it depends. If you're looking out at distant landscapes, rocky slopes have more believable depth, but the overall mountain range ends up looking flat. Fog has been reduced across the board, which is a great technical upgrade, but in some areas, these removed layers of fog gave the impression of depth. The launch version often looks gritty and dark, with Wild Run boasting a broader palette, except for the times where it looks massively overexposed. Locations have new weather effects, and through certain times of day, the game can look great. However, the improved lighting drastically alters the tone that some of these places evoked, and many end up looking less believable as a result. The original gritty aesthetic may not have been to everyone's liking, but it was an intended direction that informed the way that everything was originally designed. These same assets were then repurposed for a very different tone.
Yeah, I know, but if we're just to talk about, visual design, the guy sitting there thinking, how should this look, how should that look, Definitely the original game. Definitely, no question.
Some of this can be emulated with a road effect mod and some reshade presets, courtesy of the helpful folks on the Crew Unlimited. But not everything can be reverted in this way, especially the handling model, which was butchered in an attempt to keep cars pointing downwards at all times. Generally, the artistic direction was undone in favour of technical advancement. I mean, that's sort of a good summary of the game as a whole. Oh, and there was a second expansion, but nobody cares about that. You know, if all those wild run changes weren't documented so carefully in that Discord, I probably would never have discovered them. I'd have just missed it all, and never been the wiser. Huh, I wonder what I'm passing on this road right now, never to be seen again. There's some peppy thoughts for you. There's a somewhat obvious question at the heart of all of this. Why doesn't everyone just migrate to the Crew 2? After all, it's also a recreation of the US, and it even has boats and planes. Well, because it's a step down. The Crew held up a lens to the United States. The Crew 2 held up another lens, this time to the Crew itself. As a result, everything has become fuzzier. I don't even mean metaphorically, I mean the game often looks worse. Those roads that you'd drift down in Driver San Francisco and later in the Crew.
They just put like a ramp here so you can jump over it in the Crew too.
Oh really?
Yeah, like right here. From what I remember.
So disappointing. It misses the whole point. That's a minor example of downgrade. Some areas and quite a few landmarks are missing wholesale. Remember the location criteria that they used for the Crew 2? When you compare like for like against the first game, the sequel really comes up short. Sure, it still captures American culture, but every missed location is another piece of culture that's been removed. Take the Shoreline Fair in the Northeast. For me, it immediately evokes memories of playing Burley, and Rockstar Games clearly thought it captured the New England vibe quite well. In the Crew 2, it's gone now. Lots of areas, like the Pentagon and the Lincoln Monument, are now just sitting in open patches of grass, so there's not much consistency in the world. As for visual appeal, I'm not sure appeal is appropriate. Model and texture detail is noticeably worse, and the lighting is painfully flat. I feel bad that I criticised Wild Run now that I've seen this. Finally, it neglects the most important aspect, that in a game about casual driving and exploration, a less detailed world is hardly worth discovering. So why did they even change the map? Surely it makes more sense to build in the existing one. Why did they change it?
Well, seems like it's mainly an issue with the map loading, you know, because there's planes. Planes go faster, I figure. So you have to load.
Oh.
Yeah, so the chunks that the map is split into is bigger than the first game, and they're less detailed. So they load faster. That's the problem, you see. Think of like Minecraft chunk loading, you know? It's kind of similar here.
Yeah. It's hard to pin down one factor and hold it to blame. Realistically, it was a cocktail of circumstance. Ubisoft Reflections didn't co-develop this time round. Maybe they had a certain knack for world design that's just missing here. I also imagine Ivory Tower wanted to avoid any technical debt that they'd accumulate by relying on an old map built with old hardware. Anyway, with the mid-gen refresh of the Xbox One X and PS4 Pro, the Crew 2's visuals were updated. But honestly, it's a bit hit and miss depending on where you are. Deja vu. All of the artistic direction behind the original map was undone in favour of technical advancement. It's sort of a good summary of the Crew 2.
I don't really consider it a sequel, because it's such a different game, you know? It just happens to have the same title, the name, and just happens to have America as well. But they're just like fundamentally different games, you know? Some elements, a few elements they match, but fundamentally they're just different games. And there's not really an alternative for a game like this, you know?
When I said that releasing in 2014 was open season, well, that was a lie. Sure, there was no need for speed, but you know what else dropped that year? Forza Horizon 2. This gargantuan franchise was still on its way up, and in the time between the Crew and the Crew 2, driving games changed. If you wanted a casual driving game with car customization, online play, and an open world, then it was Forza Horizon 2, then 3, then 4. There's a lot to commend with the Horizon games. Car tuning is absolutely batty, the visuals are consistently stunning, and the racetracks just generally feel better than the Crews. It also popularized the car festival aesthetic, one that I absolutely despise. It's the most vapid, meaningless trite to exist, and it gets more saccharine with every entry. In Horizon 5, you land in a location where everybody instantly loves you. The game's best cars get consistently thrown at you through ridiculous wheel spins. and any sense of growth as a racer or even a driver is totally absent. So unfortunately, when Forza Horizon understandably took over the industry, it also smuggled in this sickening style. The Crew 2 releases, and what do you know, it's another stupid car festival.
Hero in the house. I love this place. We can kick
I
back.
hate this
you can
writing.
change your
I hate
clothes,
this
or
writing.
swap
I
the
hate
look of
this
the
writing.
vehicles,
I
bumper to
hate this
bumper.
writing. I
Or
hate this
you can do
writing. I
whatever
hate
else
this
it is you
writing.
do when
I
you're
hate
not
this
driving.
writing. You can still drive across the states, but that's no longer the explicit goal. Instead, you can jump into any location from the get-go without driving there, all in an attempt to gain followers. Bloody social media followers. It's the most vague, out-of-touch attempt at appealing to the youths, and oh my god, I hate it.
Hero, my friend. I don't want your best. I want legendary badassdom.
No wonder that the US was stripped down. You're not there to explore and appreciate the continent, you're there for clout.
Like, you could play the Crew 2, you know, it kind of has all the same locations, but, like, what's the detail, the history, it's all missing, you know?
The Crew had already moved away from its core concepts with Wild Run. That expansion even had a festival of its own. The Crew 2 doubled down on this.
Every time you set a record, it gets uploaded to the live app so you can share it with your friends.
Oh my
Give them a chance to
god.
beat.
A DLC featuring a smaller map gradually grew into a full boxed release, and the resulting game, The Crew Motorfest, completed this arc. It featured an island car festival with a map the same scale as, what do you know, Forza Horizon. But every game is like Horizon these days. We're swimming in a sea of Horizon-likes, and the Crew sunk its continental landmass just so it could take a dip. Motorfest may have taken 2 decades to circle back round to Test Drive Unlimited's Hawaiian setting, but everything else has been lost in translation. We've seen a significant downscaling of the world compared to the Crew 2, limiting the potential for exploration. There's no pedestrians or animals. This no longer feels like a world that the player exists in. It's a map constructed around them instead. It feels like Motorfest doesn't understand the appeal of the Crew, or at least it knows and no longer cares. Yes, the new game brought in a raft of improvements, but everything that kept it original has been undone to make room for that technical advancement. It's a good summary of the Crew as a whole. So then, what's Ubisoft gonna do with the first game?
They're gonna bin it. Forget about pretending they existed. Maybe add some tribute season to Motorfest.
It's hard not to feel like we're losing something significant. The Crew was not an idea made in isolation, it evolved from Test Drive Unlimited. It was a commercial success, and it even spawned a franchise. That franchise then left it behind. Do you think we'll see another game like this?
Well, no. No, there's no hope.
Damn, that's
my
bleak.
opinion, that's my opinion. I know, I'm sorry. If Solar Crown does not do good, then that's it, that's just gonna be it for games like this.
To be fair, the driving genre lives on in some capacity. Test Drive Unlimited has a new game, Solar Crown, but between delays and evidence that the map is significantly smaller than Oahu in the first game, I can't help but be a little skeptical.
They started showing TDU Solar Crown, and people were screaming at them, "Show us cruising gameplay, what is it? We want cruising gameplay," and I was like, yep.
So, in the last days of the Crew, what have the Unlimited community been doing?
No, but a lot of people are asking for refunds because, you know, the game's like getting... Still now. There we go. Kinda understandable. It's impractical, but it's understandable.
It's not really what anyone wants, though.
Yeah, we want the game, you know?
Yeah. Obviously, most people aren't doing this. What they want is more of the Crew, and well, that's what they're getting. After all, the game isn't gone just yet, so why not meet up and drive?
Is there not any other introduction they can do to this, man?
Oh, wait. Whoa! Yeah, so it turns out the Crew community are a bunch of bastards.
Dirt
got some
spec,
idea.
full spec, it doesn't matter, man. You still look like a soccer mom SUV.
Hey, Revo, you're gonna crash.
What?
I'm just saying, you're gonna crash. You're gonna crash.
What do you
I'm
mean?
just saying, like, careful,
Why
you're
are
gonna
you
crash.
saying that?
Yeah,
Oh no! Oh, don't even try it. Do not.
Microwave.
Oh my god, oh my
I love you, microwave.
In the system.
The casserole is almost done.
Offline functionality.
We gotta drink enough opium, and it will happen.
Don't even try.
I'm
Don't
getting
even
ostracized.
try. Don't even.
I'm getting.
Don't get me out!
Get him.
Get me out of
Oh! You're driving on the wall. Holy shit!
Oh, you're kidding me. Last place.
Get first place for style though.
I went into this project expecting to essentially just point and stare. Oh, yet another victim of the live service model. What a shame, blah blah. After speaking to Whammy 4 and getting the chance to hang out with people who were so unapologetically enthusiastic about this game, I can't help but get pulled in. I've had a wonderful time seeing the world, meeting strangers, and coming together to appreciate it all. The crew has its flaws and its legacy may have been marred by that, but there's so much to appreciate here. So much that is gonna disappear very soon. Huh, if I wanna see it all, I'm running out of time. Uh-oh, I've gotta go. Well, I guess that's it. She won't go any further. Ugh, and so close as well. Ugh, I was never gonna see it all anyway. There's so many races, roads, people. Now that I care, I realize that I cared too late. I know that. I knew it before. But if I could just get to the coast. Oh, wait, I forgot you can just repair your car anywhere. Well. I think I'll miss all the little places. The abandoned gold mines in the hill, the sleepy towns in the middle of nowhere, the old factories. These are the places that will likely never be featured in a game of their own, because alone, they are unexceptional. But that's neglecting the history found in the small corners of the world, the people who lived there, the culture that was created out of those spaces, and the roads that were laid down because at one time they mattered. And hey, they even managed to carve out their own part of the crew. I'd have never known they existed if not for that. And the game's end also means the loss of one of the few spaces that they featured in. But at least for this moment in time, I saw them. And yes, I saw them all. And hey, if we're lucky, it might not be the end after all.
We had a big amount of new people joining our community, and some of them are really talented folks who knew their way around software and that sort of stuff. We've been really digging deep into the crew since. Quite hard and challenging, as you can imagine, but we've been steadily progressing at fully emulating the server for the crew. It's definitely not ready yet, but we're getting there. The crew has had millions of players during its lifespan, right? And I think it's pretty much inevitable that dedicated folks like us would get together and end up saving it themselves, since Ubisoft are really douchebags and don't want to do it. You know what I mean? And guess what? I think the time has come.